Welcome to the channel. My name is Mark. This is Man on a Mission Fishing. In today's video, we're going to go over some old school worm fishing techniques. I think worms have kind of lost favor over the last few years, probably decade or more. I think with all the flashy baits and things that are available, people just shy away from that simple plastic worm, and I think that can be a mistake. I think it's a bait that Rick and I have used to catch a lot of our better fish and a lot of numbers as well. So we'll go over a few presentations here and how we like to fish them, and hopefully it'll help you in getting back onto the worm bandwagon. Let's start off with my favorite. I like the bigger worms. I like to fish 10, 11-inch worms. If you've watched your channel before, you've seen me show this many times. C-Mac net bait, 11-inch worm. Got the bait fuel, added scent to it. All the worms that I like to throw have added scent to it. Berkeley Power Bait was my original 10-inch worm. I like that one. That's got a lot of caught a lot of fish for me. And then another one that I've used quite a bit is the Gambler 10-inch worm. That has its own scent. I think it's called Gambler Bite or something like that. Now, there is a difference between these worms. They're all just a little bit different. The Gambler worm is a little bit thinner. It's got a little thinner profile. It's got a big curly tail on it. The C-Mac is a little bit thicker than the Gambler, and it's got a ribbon tail on it like this. And then the Berkeley worm also is a ribbon tail like this, but the Berkeley worm is a bit fatter. It's a bigger profile. So I generally just fish whatever's handy. I don't really pay attention to size that much as far as profile. Probably should do a little bit more of that, but they all three get bites. They all three catch fish. They're all three great choices. Generally throw these on a Texas rig. I got one rigged up here. I'll just show you kind of what I've got here. This one is right off the boat. I haven't even untied it from fall. It's basically just a standard worm hook. It's generally just a standard worm hook with a bullet weight and a bobber stop. I don't know if you can see the bobber stop real well on there. So this is a tungsten weight. This is about a 3/8 ounce weight. Generally, I like to throw the lightest weight I can get away with in the weeds that I'm in, because I like that slow fall the best. Unless it's the super thick weeds, then you throw a heavier weight, get it to the bottom right away. But as far as hook styles go, I've got just the normal round bend tied on here. That's the old school round bend weight. Looks like this. Then you could also throw just a straight hook without the worm bend in it, to keep the worm on. It's got its keeper like that. Both of those hooks, when you thread them on, I'll thread one on here, the old style hook like I got on my rig there. You just obviously everybody's fished a plastic worm, I think. You just pop that in, take it all the way down so that the eyelet, you can put it inside the worm like this, or you can leave it just barely out, and then when it comes here, you just skin hook this sucker so that the worm lies straight. It looks like that, and that way when the fish bites it, you can set the hook and the hook sets. Now, both this round bend style and this basically this like flipping hook, the straight shank, both of those are a little more unforgiving with the worm in my experience. They tear the worm a lot easier. They especially the straight shank, that'll tear up the point of the worm quite a bit, so you have to shorten it or just use a new one, rather than this other hook, which is basically the wide gap hook like that. That one, when you hook this one, you thread it in the top just the same way. Goes down. and then you look to see where that hook point would be on the worm, and then you push it all the way through, and then you can expose that on the worm like that, and that way it remains weedless. And this one is kind of how I generally fish worms. I don't know why I have that other one tied on. I must have ran out of these or something. I don't know. You can generally fish any style hook. They all work. Just whatever suits your preference or whatever you've got on hand. They all work. They all have their places. Now, to fish those worms, generally what I do is I like to throw it out, let it fall on semi-tight line with a slight bow in it, and then you can feel the fish hit it on the drop. Or I like to let it drop all the way to the bottom, and then I'll let it sit, and then I'll just slowly drag it. And I don't generally drag it all the way back to the boat. I drag it back maybe, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 feet, and then I'll crank it right back up and then make another cast. Rick, on the other hand, he's more of a cast out, let it sink, and then swim that sucker or drag that sucker all the way, almost all the way back to the boat. And he does catch a lot of fish straight below the boat, but I don't have the patience for that. I have a hard time. I like to make the cast. I get most of my bites on the fall, generally catching more active fish. Rick generally scrounges out the tough biters, which works good as fishing as a pair. So that works out pretty good. And Rick, he likes to fish a little bit smaller worms. He's more of a 7, 8-inch worm. You know his favorite, if you watch the channel. His favorite is the power bait kingtail worm. I think it's like a 7 or 8-inch worm, 8-inch. And he rigs it the same way. He Texas rigs, drags that sucker in. I think he exposes most of his. He likes the extra wide gaps hooks. He's almost all extra wide gap. I've got a wide variety of hooks, so we're just different that way. One important thing about worm fishing that I can't stress enough is if the bite is tough, you can just throw it and just let it lay there on the bottom, or have just an even lighter weight on it and let it lay right in the weeds. And if you're familiar with the lake and you know that fish are in the area, and you've caught them there before, and you know all of a sudden they're not biting, or they bit yesterday, we caught so many, and now today we can't catch any, you can throw that sucker out and let it lay on the weeds and just don't do anything. Just let it sit, and pretty soon your line will get tight and you'll feel the fish swim off with it. You can set the hook and catch them. I've caught so many big fish like that. You just have to have, when the weather is a cold front or whatever, you just have to have patience, which is hard for me, but it definitely works. So in addition to those couple of worms that I showed you that I like to Texas rig and Rick's favorite, there are a couple others that I throw on the Texas rig. When I want to downsize a bit, I'll throw a 7-inch Berkeley power worm like this. Basically the same thing as the 10-inch worm, it's just 7 inches. And then if I want to go even smaller, I will throw a 4-inch worm. Now these 4-inch worms are more like a curly tail. They're not really a ribbon tail. They look like this. And really the 4-inch worm is more what I throw on the next presentation I'm gonna show you. The next presentation I'd like to get into is the jig worm. Now jig worm is very popular up here in Minnesota. Lots of people catch a lot of fish on a jig worm, and I'll show you a couple of the heads that I use. And actually most of the heads that I use are like chartreuse or black, but I have a couple here that I use, some real light ones for shallow water or sparser weeds. I throw this jig head right here. It's got a real basic keeper on it, real light, and that fits real nice in on these little 4-inch worms. You know, you can fit them right in here like this. Another one I like to throw a lot is like a small football head. A little football head like this, little finesse football head. These work real good with the 7-inch. They fit on there pretty good. And you always rig these, you just leave the hook exposed. I'm not going to rig these. Waste a perfectly good worm, but you just throw those and just thread that on like a normal hook, and just leave the hook exposed. And then you throw it out there and let it sink into the weeds and just let it sit. Kind of dead stick that a lot, or you can pop it in, work it in. When it hangs on the weeds, you give it a big pop and tear it free, and that's when a lot of times the fish will be triggered to bite. At the same time, you can throw weedless hooks. This is just an example that I had here in the tack room. I haven't thrown these a lot, but it's the VMC weedless finesse hook. It basically has a wire guard on, a couple of wire guards on it. You thread those worms on there, just throw them. Come through the weeds a little bit better, but I tend to like the ones that don't have a weed guard on them the best. And another presentation, similar to a jig worm, I have rigged up here. It's a shaky head. Shaky head is more of a big beefy hook. They look like this here. And you Texas rig these. You'll put these on, and the worm will sit. The worm will sit up on the head, under the head, and then you bury the hook in the worm, just like a Texas rig. And that, down south they throw that a lot. This is a real light one. You can throw that right in the weeds too. I tend to like the more open hook ones because, I don't know, this one fouls a lot. When you get it in the weeds and try and pull it through the weeds or whatever, the worm will come off and it'll ball up on the hook a little bit. So I generally just like to thread them on and just fish them like that. And that's basically it for jig worms. Now, jig worms, most of the time you'll throw it on the outside weed line, on a deep coontail patches, sparser weeds. It's just a different presentation. They sink a little bit slower than a Texas rig, because generally you'll throw a lighter weight, and those you just let sit in the weeds a lot. Now I remember fishing a tournament as a non-boater way back in the probably early 2000s, maybe late 90s, where my pro partner, fished a jig worm. He fished a black worm like this on a small jig head, like the smallest one that I had here. And we got into a shallow cabbage flat, and he would cast his line out there and then just not even move. As a matter of fact, when it came to lunchtime, he would cast his rod out, set the rod down, pulled out his radio, turns his, the old transistor radio on, sat there and ate his sandwich and just kind of watched his rod tip. When the line would move or whatever, he'd pick up his rod and set the hook. And he probably caught 10 to 1 fish against me, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing at that time. But I learned a lot that day, and I've become a better jig worm fisherman, but definitely not as good as he was. He was a great jig worm fisherman. The second type of worm I'm going to talk about is the straight tail worm. This is a real popular worm as well. I have 2 examples that I'll show, 2 of my favorites. The first one is a 6-inch straight tail worm by Roboworm. This happens to be the fat version of the Roboworm. Basically just looks like that. This one's in Aaron's green pumpkin. It's a real dark green pumpkin with a purple stripe down the side. Very popular color. Caught a lot of fish on that. The other worm is the trick worm by Zoom. This happens to be the Magnum. I like the Magnum. It's a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger profile here. This one's in watermelon red color. Basically the same profile. Straight tail worm, little knob on the end. Gives a little quiver. I'll do most of the presentation with this bigger worm. It's a little bit easier to see. So these worms can be fished the same way that the curly tail and the ribbon tails can be fished. Real good on a jig worm. You can Texas rig these, but I would say more people throw these in like a wacky rig configuration. And my personal favorite that I'm going to talk about today is the Nico rig. Neko rig. I'm going to call it Nico. So the Nico rig style. Basically what the Nico rig is it's a wacky rig with one added component. And for wacky rig fishing, most people, or I should say a lot of people use just a straight wacky hook. This is just a round, just a small little hook, wide gap. This is for smaller worms like this. I personally like the Nico style hook from VMC with that longer shank on it. And of course they make these styles of worm hooks in weedless as well. I generally throw the non-weedless ones. I just like to, I don't mind getting hung up in the weeds and then popping it free. I think that gets a lot more bites. This is an example of weed guarded one. It's got a nylon, this is a VMC, it's got a nylon weed guard on it. But generally speaking, I like to throw these non-weed guarded hooks. So basically for a wacky rig, what you do is you take your worm, and I think everybody knows they fish the wacky worm from coast to coast, from border to border. Everybody probably uses a wacky rig. It's probably the most popular way to fish a worm of all time. It's still using, a lot of people are still using it today. You basically take your worm and you just put your hook right through the middle of the worm, and then it has the same amount of space on each side, and then it'll quiver in the water when you reel it in. It'll pulse. Now most people will throw like a Yamamoto Senko on there or some other stick bait, but I find that these trick worms work really good as well. So to save a little wear and tear on your baits, a lot of guys will put like an O-ring or a some type of a band in the middle of the worm, and then hook their hook through that band instead, so that the worm doesn't get torn up. That way you can fish a lot more, catch a lot more fish on one worm. And basically, you can buy bands in these big packs like this, and they sell wacky rig tools. I don't use those. I bought an ear speculum off of Amazon. I mean, it's basically just like a pliers. You push this and it opens like that. You just pop your band on the end of that sucker, squeeze it, it opens right up like that, and then you can just put the end of the worm right through this speculum like this, once the band, and then close, and then pinch it off. Once that band's on there, you can push that up and down the worm relatively easily. And then you'll hook your hook on the band instead of through the worm for wacky rigging. But that keeps the hook parallel to the bait. A lot of guys don't like that for wacky rig fishing. They'd rather have it hooked like this. So they do make cross snaps and things like that. I think VMC makes a good one. I think Arsenal maybe makes a good one, where you hook it through a little hole in the top of the band that keeps the hook perpendicular. That allows better hookups, so that if the worm folds over the top, it doesn't catch on the hook point. For the Nico rig, when I feed those bands on, I like to make sure that like 2/3 of the worm towards the thin end, and the thick end is about 1/3. And the reason I like to do that is because when I'm not fishing it exactly like a wacky rig, basically, the wacky rig gets more in the center, and then it undulates through the water as you're bringing it in, and and as it falls, it shimmies. The Nico rig is different in that it has a weight inserted in the fat end of the worm, and these weights come in a couple of different styles. You can get just a standard nail weight like this one. This is a real light one, 3/64 I think it is. It's got a sharp end on one end and a flat end on the other. Or you can buy them from VMC. These VMC ones have skirting material on one end. It's kind of a heavy fat end on this side, goes down to a point. It's got some ribs on it so that it holds in the worm the best. Now for these with the skirting material, and if they've got like a ball on the end or whatever, you'll insert those right into the head of the worm, and then you would leave the ball or the skirting material out so that it, you know, can get some action underwater. And they like to leave it out because when this sinks, it'll sink like this, weight down, and then when the weight ticks on the bottom, if you're fishing over rocks or hard cover, whatever, it'll make noise when it's bouncing. Now for these nail weights, I like to put them in more, not at the end, but kind of in the middle of the worm, and you push them all the way in, and then you'll pull the end of the worm over the top and push it back in so that it's basically all the way inside the worm, nothing showing. Then you can put a little drop of super glue or something like that on that. A lot of times you'll always put super glue like in the hole where you're going to push them in, because they have a tendency to fall out, especially if the fish jumps and shakes. It'll pop the weight right out of your worm. So once you have it rigged, I'm not going to mess this worm up by putting a weight in it. I'm just going to show you without the weight, but remember the weight's in this fatter end here. So then when you rig your hook on these Nico rigs, it rigs a little bit different than the wacky worm. Rather than being in the center and perpendicular to the worm, I like these. Basically you rig parallel to the worm so that so it sits like this. So you'll just put it in under the band through the worm, however you want to do it, and it'll look like this. See how that hook is kind of parallel to the way the worm is going to run. And the reason you do it like this, you hook from the weighted side of the worm here under the band to the skinny end of the worm. And the reason you do that is because when you're working this through the water, it's going to be like, it's going to fall like this, and then as you bring it in, when the fish grabs it, the hook will be pointed up and it'll be right in the roof of his mouth when you set the hook. Whereas if you had the hook the other way, the hook point is down and he grabs it, then when you set the hook, the hook isn't pointing up. You'll have a better chance to not get hook penetration at all, or it'll hook like funny in the bottom of his mouth. And that's one of the best presentation there is for worm fishing. I can't stress enough how many fish we've caught like this. This is definitely right there with the Texas rig for me. I love throwing these. These work great anywhere in the water column. You can fish those out deep, depending upon what size weight you've got. Right? You can fish these ultra slow with a light weight, deep or shallow, or you can fish with heavy weight. Fish it right on the bottom. A lot of times I'll just float these bad boys in the water column over weeds or through the weeds, sparse weed cover. The fish will hit these on the fall a lot of the time, and they'll pick them off the bottom too. But it's a real versatile presentation. It's just like a wacky rig. It's a little bit easier to fish because you don't have to wait so long for the bait to get to the bottom, or you can skip it real good with that weight in there. You can skip it under docks or branches or whatever. It's just a great presentation. I don't think I think a lot of people use wacky rig instead of an eco rig, and I think it gives just a little bit different presentation to a wacky rig that fish can't resist. That fall is a little bit faster, so when you pop it off the bottom, instead of hovering up there and floating like that and I'm staring at it, it darts back down to the bottom and they'll grab it. So yeah, great presentation. Another sneaky presentation for these worms, these bigger Magnum trick worms and these like 10, 11 inch ribbon tail worms would be a free rig. Now I don't have a ton of experience with the free rig. I threw it a fair amount this past year, but I threw mostly creature baits on it and I caught a lot of good fish on it. I think I'm going to fish that rig a lot more in the coming year, just based on size of the fish that I caught on it this past year. So I'm going to experiment a little bit more with it, see if I can fine tune my presentations a little bit better. So these free rigs are basically a take on Texas rigging. It's basically just a hook with a weight above it on the line, except the weight is not your standard bullet weight. It is a cylinder weight. It has a long profile with a swivel at the top that allows it to slide much more easily on the line. You know, if you have a bullet weight on there, there's more area on the weight and the line, and it just doesn't slide quite as freely. It does separate, but not like these do. These really separate. So the deeper you fish, the more it'll separate. So the idea here is when you cast this out, the bait will hit the water, and then the weight will drop. And as the weight drops, the bait stays off the bottom, and then it just slowly will float down or stay, depending on what bait you use. It could stay way off the bottom. It's got more salt. If it's more buoyant, it'll stay up. And then as you work this, when you pull your line, the weight will go right back down to the bait, and you can drag it on the bottom just like a Texas rig. And then you can give your rod a big pop, and it'll pop off the bottom, and the bait will separate from the weight again. And you can just rinse and repeat that back to the boat. And that's how I've caught a lot of fish over the last 2 years. I've used it primarily, but I'm going to use it a lot more because I have been using creature baits on it. I want to try it a little bit more with worms. And those are really the 4 presentations I wanted to talk about today. Texas rig, a rig that probably doesn't get as much love as it deserves. Jig worm, standard northern killer. Nico rig, twist on the wacky rig. Wacky rig and Nico rig, probably the best, most popular worm presentation going right now. And then the free rig, which I don't think gets talked about at all. I think that's a bait on the rise, and I think if you try it this next summer, you'll catch a lot of fish and be quite surprised by it. Now, that's not saying you can't catch fish in a multitude of other ways with plastic worms. I mean, drop shot, that skinny robo worm, straight tail worm, a lot of guys will throw that on a drop shot and catch tons of fish. One way that people catch fish on worms, Carolina rig, or even better yet, finesse Carolina rig, better known as the Mojo rig. Haven't seen anybody throwing a Mojo rig for years, but that's basically a finesse Carolina rig, and that works great too. I can just touch on that for a second. You can buy little packs. I got this one at Bass Pro. It's basically just a Nico. It's basically just a Mojo rig pack. Comes with a whole bunch of these weights, cylinder weights like this, with Carolina rig type weights, but smaller. And then it comes with a bunch of stoppers. It looks like this. You basically thread this weight on your line, put one of these stoppers on there as well, pull the end of the stopper tight to cinch it up so that the weight can't move. Give it 6, 10, 18, 20 inches. Works just like a mini Carolina rig for finesse presentations. Generally fish it on bait finesse system, bait casters, or spinning rods. And that's really all I wanted to talk about. That's it for worm fishing. I think if you guys want to catch a bunch of fish in the old school fashion, try a couple of these presentations I talked about today. I think you'll find that they work fantastic. So thanks so much for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Mark from the Tackle Room here at Man on a Mission Fishing. I'll see you around.